And we'll start with 1 and 2, which introduce, as I put in the prep guide, which introduce shalom. Therefore, since we have been justified by faith, chapter 3, 21 and following. Another way to translate justified is have been rectified. That was my Professor Leander Keck's favorite way of putting it. Having been made right or put in right relationship with God is an extrapolated version. Right? Therefore, since we have been made right by faith, we have peace with God. Shalom is the huge Hebrew word behind a smaller Greek word. Means more than just the cessation of conflict. It means something whole in relationship and in community. We have shalom with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have gained access. Access, this Greek word puts to mind Esther approaching the king. If you know the story of Esther, you know that she at first was hesitant about approaching the king, Artaxerxes, about saving the Jewish people when Haman has plotted against them in that great narrative of Esther. She doesn't want to present herself, because when you present yourself before a king at a time when he doesn't want to be presented to, it is a huge thing. And so this word has to do with that kind of access, that kind of yes. The king says yes. Here God says yes. Through whom we have received, through whom we have gained access by faith. And the brackets are because it's not that by faith phrase is not in all of the earliest translation, or all of the earliest manuscripts. It's in most of them, so it gains entrance into brackets, but it's not in all of them, so there's a chance it wasn't in the initial. Have gained access by faith to this grace in which we stand. In your handout, I have the New Living Translation. Tonight, we're using the New American Standard Bible, a revised edition from 2020. And it is a very wooden translation. It's a very literal translation and doesn't do anything to sort of make the flow easier or more poetic. It just tries to translate the thoughts very directly. But here we get, have gained access by faith to this grace in which we stand. The New Living expands this to the unmerited nature of God's favor, right? So in that translation, we would get something that widens out the word grace, that it is an unmerited favor. It's not something that is earned. It's having our clutter door open and having the beloved one look right at it. This grace in which we stand. And here's an interesting turning point. And we boast in hope of the glory of God. How has boasting, I don't know if you remember, but how has boasting come in the first several chapters before this one? Do you remember boasting being mentioned? Turn to 2:17, where boasting is by no means a good thing. Paul talks about, if you call yourself a Jew and rely upon the law and boast of your relation to God and know God's will and approve what's excellent because you're instructed in the law, and if you're sure that you're a guide to blind people, a light to those who are in darkness, a corrector of foolish, a teacher of children, having in the law the very embodiment of knowledge and truth, if all of that is true, you then who teach others, why don't you teach yourselves? In other words, he's picturing this crowd as boasting in their attainments. And he pokes a hole in that boasting because, and this is what we've been talking about all throughout, Paul doesn't like it when people think of this church, think of his gathered group of people who are coming together as the people of God, as hierarchical, that some are better than others. The Jews have been here longer, so they have an upper hand. Or in other places, that people who believe a certain way are above others who don't yet believe in that way. He likes level. He doesn't like boasting. So boasting hasn't gone over well. So how does Paul bring boasting in here? Because suddenly it's an okay thing to do. Paul even does it. and we boast in hope of the glory of God. Notice the difference. This isn't a status-producing boast. This isn't a boast that rests on what Paul and his buddies and what we have done. We boast in hope of the glory of God. All that he's been talking about since 321 is where we couldn't come up with the goods, God did it for us. God supplied where we lacked with total help for total need. And here he says, that's the only thing you can really boast in. Right? Now, we're going to get another boast here in a second, but it's all you're going to be even a more ironic one. The opening of the chapter, the first two verses, remember together that grace has just happened magnificently in chapter 3, and start to tilt toward what's next in chapter 5.